I crouched over the hood of an old Volkswagen Beetle, my hands black with grease, my focus razor sharp. The engine had become a puzzle, and I was determined to solve it. Sweat trickled down the side of my face, but I didn't bother wiping it away. Work had always been my rhythm, my escape, my everything. People in my neighborhood spoke about me, not because I was loud or flashy, but because of what I could do. While others fumbled with tools, I had a knack for taking an engine apart, laying its pieces out like a puzzle, and putting it back together until it ran like new. My life revolved around the garage, earning a steady wage, saving pesos, and dreaming of a future. I pictured myself owning a shop one day, maybe even a small house on the quiet side of town. Love? I figured it would find me eventually, though it wasn't something I thought about often. At least, not until everything changed. There was one car that captured my imagination like no other. A gleaming black 1968 Chevrolet Impala. It wasn't mine, of course. The car belonged to Adam, a gruff man who brought it in now and then. Adam never said much about the Impala's real owner, and I didn't ask. The details didn't matter. What mattered was the car itself, a masterpiece of steel and chrome. Its lines so perfect they looked like they were drawn by the hands of a god. But daydreams end. They always do. I'd climb out of the car, lock it up, and head home, leaving the Impala behind like a secret I could never fully claim. One evening, I came home to find my mother glowing with excitement. She had news. She'd arranged for me to marry Luna, a woman from a neighboring town. I didn't argue. In truth, the thought pleased me. I had always been content to work hard and keep my head down, but the idea of building a life with someone like Luna, a kind, warm soul, gave me a purpose beyond engines and wrenches. The wedding was simple, a gathering of family and close friends. I wore a crisp white shirt, my hair neat for once, and Luna looked radiant in her dress. There were no grand flourishes, but it was enough. Afterward, life settled into a comforting routine. I worked long hours at the garage, coming home each night to her bright smile and the smell of home-cooked meals. The days were hard, but the nights were soft, filled with her laughter and the quiet companionship that made everything feel right. Years passed, and through grit and determination, I finally achieved my dream. My own garage. Taller Martinez stood on a busy corner in Cancun, a small but proud testament to the hours I had poured into my craft. The sign above the entrance gleamed with fresh paint, and inside, the scent of new tools filled the air. It wasn't just mine, though. Adam had come to me with an offer, a loan from the mysterious owner of the Impala. At first, I hesitated, but in the end, I accepted. It was a chance I couldn't let slip away. The garage did well, and soon enough, I was able to buy a house. It wasn't extravagant, but it was ours. A home for Luna and me to build our future. Or so I thought. At first, I didn't think much of it when Luna began spending her afternoons with the neighborhood wives. She was social, and I figured she deserved some companionship while I worked. But as time passed, her outings grew more frequent. The gatherings stretched later into the evening, and eventually, it became rare for her to be home when I finished my long days at the shop. The warmth of our home began to fade. The meals she used to prepare were gone, replaced by an empty table and the faint trace of her perfume lingering in the air. Even when she was home, she felt distant. Her conversations revolved around neighborhood gossip and trends, things that felt shallow compared to the bond we used to share. We stopped laughing together. Quiet dinners became nights filled with excuses and complaints. The intimacy we once had slipped away, and I couldn't remember the last time Luna had touched me the way she used to. I tried to ignore it, burying myself in work, but the silence in our home was deafening. Finally, I couldn't keep quiet any longer. I had to ask. I had to know what had gone wrong. One night, after a long day at the garage, I tried to talk to Luna about the growing distance between us. I was nervous, but I needed to understand what was happening to us. She didn't even bother looking up from the magazine she was flipping through. Instead, she dismissed me with a wave of her hand. "You're always working, Richard," she said flatly, "and I'm tired. We can talk about this later." Her tone stung, but I let it go. Later never came. I had always dreamed of a noisy house filled with children, of little feet pattering across the floor and laughter echoing off the walls. It was the dream that kept me going on those long days under the hood of a car, the vision I held onto while I worked to build a better future for us. One evening, when we were eating dinner in near silence, I brought it up. "Luna," I said carefully, trying to gauge her mood, "what do you think about starting a family?" Her fork froze halfway to her mouth, and then she set it down with deliberate force. "No," she said sharply. "Not yet." Her reaction stunned me. "Why not?" I asked, leaning forward. "We're stable now. We've got the house, the garage. What are we waiting for?" She stood abruptly, crossing her arms over her chest. Her eyes narrowed, her posture defensive. "I'm not ready," she snapped. "Do you know what pregnancy does to a woman's body? I can't ruin my figure, Richard. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe. For years, I had poured myself into building a life for us, thinking we wanted the same things. But in that moment, I realized how far apart we were. Her refusal wasn't just about the children. It was about us. I worked even harder after that, throwing myself into the garage to avoid the growing void at home. But Luna, she found her escape elsewhere. While I spent my days covered in grease and grime, Luna discovered a new rhythm to her life. What started as innocent gatherings with the neighborhood wives turned into something else entirely. The women, many of them frustrated in their own marriages, began venturing into nightlife. The bars on the Strip welcomed them with open arms. They laughed loudly over the pulsing music, their glasses clinking as they toasted to stolen moments of freedom. Luna soaked it all in. After years of being the dutiful wife to a man she barely knew before our marriage, these nights out felt like liberation. At first, it was harmless. Flirting with strangers gave her a thrill, a reminder that she was still desired. But it didn't stop there. As the weeks went on, Luna became more entrenched in this world. The attention from other men, strangers who didn't ask for commitments or question her choices, made her feel alive in a way that life at home couldn't. I didn't see any of it. I worked 12, sometimes 14-hour days, convinced that I was building a future for the both of us. To me, Luna was still my everything. She was the dream I clung to after years of hard work, the light I held onto when things got hard. I didn't care that we'd barely known each other before we got married. I loved her now. I loved her today. That was all that mattered. But even as I tried to ignore the cracks forming in our life together, they were there. My hands, once so steady, now trembled when I worked. The spark in my eyes had dulled, replaced by a shadow of exhaustion and pain. And still, I didn't see it. Not until Adam pulled me aside one day and said, "Richard, can we talk? There's something you need to know." I told Adam about Luna. The way she had changed, the distance between us, her refusal to have children. I told him about the endless outings, the gnawing suspicion that I was losing her to something, or someone, I couldn't see. Adam listened, his face unreadable. When I finally fell silent, he let out a long sigh. "Kid," he said, "I've seen a lot of things in my line of work. Good people broken by the ones they trust most." I turned to him, confused. "What do you mean?" Adam's expression sharpened. "I'm not just some guy who likes cars," he said. "I'm a hitman. I work for people you don't want to cross. But part of my job is finding out the truth, surveillance, digging into people's lives. If you want, I can help you. I can find out what your wife's been up to. But it'll cost you." I didn't even hesitate. "I'll pay," I said, my voice firm despite the storm raging inside me. Adam's eyes narrowed slightly. "The cost might not be money. Are you sure you're ready to pay it?" I nodded. "Whatever it takes. I just want my life back." The next day, Adam began his work. He was discreet, tailing Luna and her friends without drawing attention. Within a week, he had more than enough to confirm what I had feared. The group wasn't just gathering for harmless social outings. They were spending their nights at bars, drinking and dancing with strange men. Luna wasn't just flirting. She was going home with other men, different men, sometimes twice a week. Adam documented everything, compiling a damning collection of evidence. One evening after the garage closed, Adam pulled me aside, his face grim. "I'm sorry, kid," he said. "Your wife isn't just out partying. She's been sleeping with other men, regularly." The words hit me like a blow. I stared at him, my breath caught in my throat. Adam reached into his jacket and handed me a small USB drive and a plain brown envelope. I didn't want to bring you this without proof, he said. Everything's here. Videos, hotel bills, timelines. I didn't miss anything. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were printed screenshots of hotel reservation confirmations, receipts, and photos. Luna's name stared back at me from the documents. They weren't receipts for dinners or drinks but for rooms, rented by the hour. Adam motioned to the laptop on the workbench. Take your time. When you're ready, we'll talk about what's next. He left me alone with the evidence. I plugged in the USB, my heart hammering in my chest as I opened the first file. There she was, Luna, laughing and dancing in a crowded bar, a man's arm wrapped around her waist. The clips that followed were worse. Her walking hand in hand with different men, entering hotels, her face lit with a carefree smile I hadn't seen in years. By the time I reached the last file, I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was caving in, crushed under the weight of her betrayal. When I got home that night, Luna was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine like nothing had changed. Luna, I said, my voice cracking. We need to talk. She looked up, startled by my tone, but quickly masked it with indifference. What is it now? I moved closer, pulling the printed hotel bills from my jacket. I threw them onto the coffee table. You're not even trying to hide it anymore, I said, my voice low and trembling. What's this, Luna? Her eyes flicked to the papers, and for a moment, I saw panic flash across her face. Then she let out a nervous laugh. What is this, Richard? Are you spying on me now? This is ridiculous. Don't lie to me. I snapped, my voice rising. I know everything. The hotels, the men, the lies. I've been working myself to the bone for us, and this is how you repay me. Her face hardened. Maybe if you hadn't been so obsessed with your garage, you'd have noticed a long time ago, she spat, her voice cold. The weight of her words, her defiance, and the undeniable proof of her betrayal was too much. In that moment, everything I had built, everything I had dreamed of, shattered around me. Adam's voice cut through the haze. Luna won't get away with this, kid. As I lay on the makeshift table in the dimly lit warehouse, pain pulsing through every fiber of my broken body, Adam's words anchored me. I blinked slowly, trying to focus. My body felt like it had been through hell, and my mind was trapped in the chaos of what had just happened. Memories came flooding back. Luna's cold, venomous words, the fists that had beaten me into submission, the cruel laughter that echoed as I was dragged out and left for dead. A surge of anger coursed through me, momentarily dulling the pain. She's not finished, I croaked, my voice raspy and broken. Adam leaned in closer, his usually stoic face set with an expression I couldn't quite read. Part concern, part determination. No, she isn't. But neither are you. I tried to sit up, but my ribs screamed in protest, and I slumped back with a grunt of pain. I'll make her pay, I said, forcing the words out. For everything. Adam nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. We'll deal with her. But first, you need to heal. There's no use in revenge if you can't stand on your own 2 feet. The days that followed were a blur of agony and recovery. Adam's men stayed close, guarding the warehouse like it was a fortress. The doctor returned daily, patching me up, his face grim as he worked on my injuries. You're lucky to be alive, he said more than once, shaking his head as he cleaned my wounds. Lucky? I didn't feel lucky. I felt like a man who had lost everything. My wife, my trust, and the life I thought I had built. Yet, beneath the pain and despair, there was a flicker of something else. Something dark. A resolve. One evening, Adam sat across from me, a bottle of tequila and 2 glasses between us. It's time we talked about what happens next, he said, pouring a generous measure into each glass. Revenge is a tricky thing. It's not just about hurting them. It's about making sure they can never hurt me again. Adam nodded slowly. Then you'll need more than anger, kid. You'll need patience, strategy, and the right people by your side. That's where I come in. What are you saying? I asked, my fingers curling into fists despite the pain. I'm saying, Adam said, leaning forward, his voice low and deliberate, that if you want to take her down, you're going to need help. Lucky for you, I'm very good at dismantling lives. Luna had underestimated me. She thought I was weak, that she could break me and walk away unscathed. She was wrong. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let us know in the comments. I was no longer the man Luna thought she could manipulate and discard. Her hands trembled as she crumpled the note, but the words still echoed in her head. You can run to the edge of the world, but I will always be there. Her lover was pacing now, his movements frantic and aimless. He's toying with us, he muttered, panic thick in his voice. This isn't just revenge, Luna. Luna sat frozen, staring at the box as if it might spring to life. She couldn't comprehend the transformation of the man she had once laughed at behind his back, calling him naive, a simpleton. The Richard she knew was a quiet mechanic, content to toil away in the garage. But this was something else entirely. We have to leave, her lover shouted, breaking through her spiraling thoughts. He grabbed her shoulders, shaking her roughly. Do you hear me? He's going to come for us, and we're sitting ducks here. Luna yanked herself free from his grip, her face twisting with anger. And where do you think we'll go? She spat. Do you think he won't find us wherever we run? He's already here. Don't you get it? He's everywhere. Her lover stared at her, his face pale, his lips trembling. So what are we supposed to do? Wait here for him to kill us both? Luciana's eyes flicked back to the box, bile rising in her throat as she caught sight of its grisly contents again. Her hands balled into fists, and her expression hardened. This isn't about running, she said, her voice cold now, steely. Running won't stop him. He's not the man I thought he was. I pushed him too far. I made him into this. Her lover looked at her, his panic giving way to confusion. What are you saying? Luna's lips curled into a bitter sneer. I'm saying this is my fault, and if I don't stop him, there won't be anything left for him to destroy. Outside, the night was quiet, but I moved like a shadow, blending into the darkness. My steps were slow, methodical, every movement a testament to the relentless fire burning inside me. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was retribution, poetic and merciless. Luna had torn apart his world, stomped on his dreams, laughed at his love, and humiliated him in ways that left permanent scars. Now, I was repaying her in kind, dragging her into a nightmare that she wouldn't wake up from. The motel doors stood before me, a flimsy barrier separating me from the next chapter of my vengeance. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a red ribbon. I tied it carefully around the handle, the color vibrant even under the dim light of the motel parking lot. The ribbon was a symbol of the life she had destroyed and the pain she had unleashed. I stepped back, letting the ribbon hang there, a silent herald of what was to come. Inside the motel room, the oppressive silence was shattered by a single knock at the door. Luna froze, her blood turning to ice. Her lover scrambled to the peephole, peering outside with wide, frightened eyes. No one's there, he whispered, his voice shaking. Luna swallowed hard, her legs refusing to move. Open it, she said, barely audible. Her lover hesitated, but her cold stare pushed him into action. He unlocked the door and opened it cautiously, glancing down. There it was, a red ribbon tied neatly to the handle. What the hell is this? He muttered, his voice wavering. Luna's chest tightened as she moved to the door, her breath hitching when she saw the ribbon. Her knees buckled, and she stumbled backward. The ribbon was unmistakable. I had used them to wrap her birthday gifts for years, always in the same careful bow. Her lover bent to untie the ribbon, but Luna screamed, "Don't touch it." It was too late. The ribbon fell away, revealing a small black box taped to the doorframe. Her lover pulled it down, and despite her protests, opened it. Inside was another note, this one written in sharp, deliberate strokes. You took everything from me. Now I'll take everything from you, piece by piece. Underneath the note was a gruesome sight. A severed finger, a cheap silver ring still on it, tarnished and covered in blood. Luna's heart dropped. She recognized the ring. It belonged to Daniel, one of her lovers. Her lover gasped, dropping the box as if it burned him. "He's serious," he whispered, his voice trembling. "He's hunting us, Luna. This isn't just a threat. This is real." Luna backed away, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The red ribbon, the box, the note. They all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. I wasn't the man she had betrayed. I had become something far worse, something unstoppable. I stood outside in the shadows, watching their panic through the thin motel curtains. A flicker of satisfaction crossed my face, but it didn't last long. Satisfaction wasn't the point. The point was to dismantle her life piece by piece, just as she had done to his. I turned and walked away, my next move already planned. This was only the beginning. Luna thought she had escaped her past, but now her past was hunting her, and it wouldn't stop until she had lost everything. Subscribe for you don't miss new cheating stories. Luciana spent the last 3 days locked inside the suffocating walls of the motel room, her fear clawing at her sanity. What once felt like a haven now felt like a prison, and every shadow seemed to threaten her safety. She hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten. The man she had once dismissed as weak and simple had become something unrecognizable, and she had no idea how to escape him. Emiliano, her last remaining ally and lover, had been on edge too. He paced constantly, his phone clutched in his hands, waiting for updates that never came. He didn't speak much, but the unspoken tension between them was like a noose tightening with every passing hour. On the 4th day, he left the room to get food, promising to be back soon. But he didn't return. At first, Luna tried to convince herself he was just delayed. Perhaps the fear that gripped her heart was paranoia and nothing more. But as the hours dragged on, her unease grew unbearable. 3 hours later, she couldn't stand it anymore. Panic twisted in her chest, her hands trembling as she grabbed the car keys and bolted from the motel. She was done waiting. She needed to find him. The hot desert air hit her like a wave as she stepped outside, but she barely noticed. Her heart pounded as she started the car, her grip on the wheel tight enough to turn her knuckles white. The motel faded into the distance as she drove, heading further into the emptiness of the desert. The city lights disappeared behind her, swallowed by dust and shadows. Her mind was racing. Had Richard found Emiliano? Was he already dead? Was she driving into another trap? Every glance in the rearview mirror sent her heart racing, convinced she was being followed. But the road stretched on, barren and lonely. The emptiness of the desert surrounded her like an open grave, vast and unrelenting. She didn't know where she was going, but her instincts pulled her deeper into the expanse, further from civilization. It felt like the only place left to run, a wasteland where she could lose herself and the nightmare chasing her. But no matter how far she drove, she couldn't escape the suffocating weight pressing on her chest. Richard was out there, and she knew he wouldn't stop until she was destroyed. Luna's heart raced as she stumbled through the desert, her body teetering on the edge of collapse. She had abandoned the car hours ago, her desperation pushing her further into the barren landscape on foot. The relentless heat of the sun scorched her skin, and her throat burned with thirst. Every step was agony, her legs buckling under her weight. She couldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. But the desert was unforgiving. With each mile, her strength faded, and her mind drifted into a haze of exhaustion and despair. Then, in the distance, a shimmer appeared, a promise of salvation. Water. She ran toward it, her vision blurring as her cracked lips curled into a fleeting smile. But as she reached out, her hands grasped nothing but empty air. The mirage vanished, and with it, the last shred of hope she had clung to. Luna collapsed onto the ground, her sobs dry and choking. The world she had once manipulated so easily was now against her, and it had taken everything. Just as she began to slip into unconsciousness, a low rumble cut through the silence. A black SUV appeared on the horizon, its silhouette slicing through the shimmering air. The SUV came to a stop a few feet from her crumpled body, dust swirling around its tires. She tried to move, to call out, but her body refused to cooperate. She wanted to scream, to cry, to do anything to release the anguish building inside her. But no tears came. Her throat was too dry, her body too weak, her mind too numb. She had made his message clear. I wasn't just killing those she had turned to for comfort. I was dismantling her life piece by piece, dragging her deeper into the nightmare she had unleashed. When the sun set and the desert cooled, she forced herself to her feet. Her legs wobbled, and her breath was shallow, but she couldn't stay there. Then, just ahead, she saw me. I stood on the horizon, my silhouette outlined by the faint light of the stars. She stumbled toward to me, her lips cracking as she tried to call my name. But as she neared, I disappeared. Luna collapsed again, her body too weak to fight anymore. She thought of all the lives lost, all the men who had fallen for her lies and charm, and how it had led her to this moment. She thought of me, of the love she had crushed and the man she had created. Above her, I appeared again, this time real. I stood at the edge of the pit, staring down at her with cold, detached eyes. Her lips moved, cracked and bloody, but no words came. She could only watch as I raised a hand, motioning for the sand to consume her completely. I was no longer the man he had once been. The mechanic who loved and dreamed had died in the desert alongside his pain. My humanity stripped away to make room for something darker. I no longer dreamed of peace or love.